I am Barbara Eckhart, and I'll be reading Gloria Mac Donald's works. She's written an introduction. I'm originally from Philadelphia, an engineer retired on disability from AT&T Bell Laboratories 8 years ago. I'm now living in South Jersey with my husband John and cats Jerry and Shelley. Writing gives me the creative outlet I need when I retired from design engineering work. I've always enjoyed writing and still enjoy corresponding by written letter. I'm stuck in the 80s and a self-confessed geek. Gloria has written 2 pieces, one a poem, the other a piece of prose, but both are inspired by the same subject. First, the poem. Beyond a window. She moves softly on padded toes. No noise betrays her passing. All kindness graciously accepted. She smiles sweetly to all benefactors. Peering into lighted rooms at night, seeing others like her, so safe, so loved. How do such miracles come to be? To pass through the glass and into a life like that. No tear escapes her sad green eyes, though she leaves a little piece of her heart behind, reluctantly pulling herself away, returning to the cardboard box she calls shelter these days. Her thoughts return to the lighted rooms and eventually dreams of a home of her own beyond a window. The miracle. When she came into our lives on one of the coldest nights of the winter, I still don't know how I heard that desperate cry for help over the icy gale that was screaming in off the ocean. The young mother somehow decided she could approach our house for help. Maybe she'd seen us playing with our cat Jerry, and that validated us as cat-friendly. We found out weeks later that she and her 2 kittens had been surviving in part by eating the food we put out by the curb for the seagulls. Leftovers from Jerry's meals, out-of-date snacks, beat-up bananas. Our neighbors down the street managed to grab one of her kits when it was about 2 months old. They took her into their home and hearts, naming her Kitty. She had a sweet, loving nature, unusual for a feral, and they wondered where her appetite for cookies and soft pretzels came from. Though the young mother and her remaining kitten seemed to be sheltering elsewhere, from the night of that first encounter on, she would quietly appear whenever my husband John brought out food and water for her, politely waiting for him to call her over when it was ready. Eventually, John earned her trust, and she allowed the kitten to join her rather than keeping her hidden in the nearby bushes. As the weather warmed and more cars and people invaded our seasonally quiet street, the cat's appearances became sporadic. We lost track of them for a few weeks. The increasing amount of cars, people, and activity must have driven them into the quieter backyards of our vacation home. Because when our cat friend reappeared, it was on our back fence. She smiled as if to reassure us that she'd been okay, but her kitten was nowhere to be seen. Through spring and into summer, she spent most of her time in her favorite spot on our fence. It was perfect for enjoying the gentle ocean breezes while being shaded from the sun by an overhanging wisteria bush. Her vantage point gave her a view of the back of our house, our rear deck, and the surrounding backyards. I often saw her looking into our house through the windows across the street from where she sat. Jerry would often sit by this window, enjoying her company, separated by only a few feet and a pane of glass. We put a waterproof shelter for her under our deck, which was directly across from the fence. We gave her food and fresh water daily and were always rewarded by her quiet companionship. She seemed grateful and content with the arrangement, probably the closest thing to a home she had ever known. Her gratitude always showed on her perpetually smiling face. We grew to love our gentle cat friend and wondered if she wanted more than the food, shelter, and occasional companionship we were giving her. She usually appeared within minutes of us being on our deck, if she wasn't already in her place on the fence. She would often gaze longingly into our window as if there was something beyond it that she wanted. A life inside, perhaps? We contacted a local animal agency that specialized in helping feral cats. They explained how they would humanely trap, neuter, and vaccinate them at a nearby clinic, and then bring them back to recover and be released. They also notched one ear in case the cat was ever picked up by animal control, so they would know the cat was fixed and being cared for. We were told that we could let our friend recover from her operation in our home and then keep her inside afterward. She would need lots of careful, patient attention to help her adjust, but it was possible she could become an inside cat. We began making plans, and then everything changed. Her kitten, now 9 months old, suddenly appeared and began sharing her mother's safe haven with us. Like her mom, she had her mother's gentle, sweet nature, but she seemed restless. Less than a week later, her mother vanished, and the next morning we heard the unmistakable sounds of newborn kittens coming from the shelter under our deck. We named the new mother Shelley and did whatever we could to make her and her kittens safe and comfortable. Like her mom, Shelley hardly seemed feral. She was more like an outdoor house cat. It wasn't long before she was greeting my husband at each mealtime with smiles and meows. She trusted him with her 2 youngsters before they could even walk, and she discovered she liked being petted and even held. We were relieved when Shelley's mom began visiting, but she never stayed too long and only occasionally spent the night. She never helped herself to the special food her daughter and grandkids were getting, only eating a little from a bowl of dry food that was always kept full. We never found where she called home during this time. She no longer sat in her favorite place on our fence, though we often caught a glimpse of her nearby in a neighbor's yard. It was clear she'd given Shelley and her kittens her home, a place she knew they'd be safe and cared for. Our intentions to TNR, or trap, neuter, release, Shelley's mom, were changed to include Shelley, but we had to wait until her kittens were older. During those following weeks, we tried to come up with a solution for all our outside cats to have homes. To try to take them all in would be overwhelming and hardly the best situation for any of us. I silently prayed that somehow everything would be resolved in the best possible way for everyone, kittens, cats, and people. By now, Shelley had become so tame that John was able to put her in a regular cat carrier to take her to the clinic to be spayed and vaccinated. Her kittens joined her the day after she came home, a real home. Our outside cats were on their way to becoming inside cats. Not surprisingly, the kittens had inherited the sweet, gentle nature of Shelley and her mother. It was too easy imagining them staying with us, and they were so happy together, we didn't want to have to separate them. Fortunately, they were given a wonderful, loving home less than a week later. An older gentleman who lived alone offered to adopt both of them, although he was concerned that they had been raised outside. He later told me they were the joy of his life, and taking them in was the best decision he had ever made. We had worried about finding a home for them, but he gave them just what they needed, a quiet home full of love and play. We thought Shelley's only chance to have a real home was with us, which was just fine with our Jerry. They seemed smitten with each other the first time they touched noses. Shelley was cautious and shy at first, but gradually Jerry had her following him, exploring her new home and learning not to be afraid. John spent hours reassuring her, watching TV with her, and eventually getting her to play. She seemed well on her way to joining our household and living the life of an inside cat. But what of our sweet friend, Shelley's mother? Thinking back on all she had done, how much she meant to us, how kind and unselfish and faithful she had been. If anyone deserved a good home, it was her. We sadly resigned ourselves to having her trapped and spayed, unable to decide what to do when she came back from the clinic. If we kept her inside, how could we give both her and Shelley the time and attention both would need to adjust? And if we released her outside, she would still be facing all the dangers and discomforts of a homeless cat, though she'd always have food and shelter inside our fence.